Hey, welcome back to Low Def Media. My name is Mike, and today we are going to be talking about the 2022 Nobull CrossFit Games. Now, this is a little bit of a departure from what I normally do here on the channel, but I'm a big fan of CrossFit, and I happened to be watching day one of the CrossFit Games, and I had a couple thoughts. And I wanted to share them with you and see if these are things that maybe you picked up on, or maybe I'm just out in left field and I'm the only one who kind of notices these things. So the first one, if you're a fan of CrossFit and you've followed them through the years, you've heard them say they're a very small sport and that they don't have the revenue stream that a lot of other major sports have, like basketball, football, baseball, hockey. They're just a smaller sport. I saw all of the, I will say, commercial products, I guess, the sponsored products that are being thrown at the athletes, and it's mind-boggling. If you look at any one athlete who's sponsored by, let's say, Nobull, all right, they get an entire treasure chest full of clothes. They get shoes. Even people who aren't sponsored by some of the shoe brands, there's a new one in the space, TYR. Now, I always thought they were part of just swim gear. I thought that was their niche, was aquatics. But now they're in, they're making shoes for CrossFit, okay? Or training shoes, I guess is what you'd call them. And now they're handing them out to all these athletes, okay? I don't know if they're sponsored by them or not, but these athletes got brand new shoes in a big case. It's like almost like a suitcase or a briefcase. Very nice staging, very nice packaging, but they're giving these shoes away. And I looked online, they retail for like $150. All right, so they're not inexpensive. And so you got Nobull, you got this other company, I don't know, Reebok, who used to be the sponsor of the CrossFit Games. You've got Trifecta, who does food. You've got all these supplement brands who are there handing out things, and they're sponsoring athletes. And so it's just a commercial, it's a tidal wave of commercial products. And for a sport that's supposedly so small, they sure do sling a bunch of stuff. I saw one athlete who was sponsored by Rogue, and this person doesn't even compete, former athlete, I should say, but still prominent in the CrossFit space, got a little welcome package from Rogue, which they're a company who makes a lot of fitness equipment. And in there was like a GoPro and some workout stuff and some supplements and just a whole bunch of stuff. And this person wasn't even going to compete. And so the people who do compete, you can only imagine what they're getting. I saw another one, they're content creators, and their entire refrigerator was full of food that some company had given to them so that it would show up on their content, their videos. So a plug for them. There's a bunch of companies who do mobility or exercise preparation. So before you work out, you can do some stretching so you minimize the risk of injury. Then you can do a cool down session doing the same thing. And so they have a booth and they're handing out stuff. And so there's just all this stuff that's associated with a small sport. So I don't know if you saw that, but to me, that was very striking. When you watch other small sports, you don't see that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if this is just kind of specific to CrossFit, but you let me know. All right. And then the second thing is that the first day was kind of chaotic. The first event for the men was the bike to work is what they called it. And you had to do some biking, and then you came back into the arena and you had to do some work there on the field. Then you had to go back and do some more bike riding. And at the end, there was some question as to whether or not some athletes had finished the prescribed distance. It was 5 laps. And these athletes had gotten back surprisingly early and ahead of other athletes who were perceived to have been in the front. And so there was chaos. They didn't know how many laps that these, and it was a few athletes had completed. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is the 21st century. This is a televised event. It's not their first rodeo. They've been doing this since 2007, I believe, was the first CrossFit Games. And so you would think that this would be the easy part, that keeping up with the athletes with as many volunteers as they have and say, hey, you track that athlete, that one's yours, and you count how many reps or how many laps they do. And when they're finished, you tell them to come in and they can sprint to the finish line. There should never be any kind of ambiguity or issue with whether or not an athlete finished. I have seen in other, not events, but within CrossFit, at other competition, well, not even a competition, when they do different, exercises, events, I will say event. And there's a judge standing right there with them, counting every rep, whether they're jumping rope, whether they're doing chin-ups, whether they're doing push-ups, they're counting every single rep. So there really is no excuse why this happened, why multiple athletes why there should be any concern about how many reps, laps, or if they finished a particular exercise. That should never happen. So again, if you're a fan of the sport and you watched it, it was complete chaos. And so you tell me your thoughts. I don't even know how they decided who finished where. I just saw later in the day that adjustments were made and the person who was listed as first was no longer first, and the person who had been third is now first. And so there had been some movement there on the leaderboard. But, there are other podcasts that will talk about that at length. So if you're interested in knowing how that panned out, go watch one of them. But this is more of a bird's eye view, a hierarching view of this year's CrossFit Games, day one anyway. Now, the third thing I'll mention is that on the women's side, the teenagers have pretty much taken over. They're filling, and when I say teenagers, very young athletes, 22 and under. A couple of them are actually teenagers, and they are filling out the top 10. Now that's unique in professional sports, maybe not so much in like tennis and figure skating or gymnastics, where they tend to be very young. And the older you get, the less likely you are to perform well. But in CrossFit, muscle maturity and just exercise knowledge and knowing your body and how to perform certain exercises better or with, more efficiently. And so the older you get, the wiser you get to do that. So it's very interesting to me that these athletes are so young because they don't have a lot of experience when it comes to these exercises or the scope of this competition. So that's very, interesting to me. But the thing that causes me to pause a little bit, if you're a parent and you have children who are middle school or high school age and they compete or if they're in athletics, I was always told that you're not supposed to put a weight in a child's hand until their growth plates have fused, because it can just do damage. If you're lifting heavy weights, that can put an undue strain on your body. And you see that in gymnastics, where these girls from a very young age are, they're doing a lot of work and exercise, and their muscle mass is not the normal proportion or ratio to body fat as would be a normal, let's say, 10 or 12-year-old. And so they end up having issues. And so I look at this and I go, well, what's different here? They have a pretty low body fat percentage. They work out all the time. They lift extremely heavy weights. So what's the negative impact on their body? Has anybody looked into that? Has there ever been a study? I don't know. So I ask you, have you seen anything? Do you know of anyone who's raised a similar concern? Because I would like to know, because I just think it's very odd that there are certain sports that you can't compete in as a professional until you're a certain age. But yet in CrossFit, you've got athletes who are 17 years old competing at the highest level. So you tell me. Those are just the three things that I noticed. Now on the men's side, there are young competitors, but there's only a few, and they're in their 20s. You don't see the teenagers like you do on the female side. Most of the leaderboard, the people in the top 5, top 10, are people who are pretty well established, been around the game for a while. So it's very interesting to me on the female side that a lot of the seasoned athletes are farther down the leaderboard this year. And so tell me your thoughts on that. Like I said, today was going to be a real quick podcast. And so 10 minutes, I think we're done. So, hey, hit me up in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on the 2022 Nobull CrossFit Games. See you in the next one.